Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, April 9th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the states that the Democratic Party overestimates their support in and why this is relevant for the 2024 presidential election. Now, before we get started, I was watching one of my previous videos and I saw a few comments about this. My microphone is, it picks up everything. I think that it definitely does its job, and it sometimes picks up when my phone rings. I think you probably just heard me look to the side there, but my phone is now far away from the microphone, so you won't have to hear that. I didn't realize that it was still on silent. It wasn't like the ringer was going off, but it does pick that up, whereas my other mic did not. My mic could have been right next to it, and you wouldn't have heard it. But this one is much more in depth, which is why the volume is louder, and it seems a little bit more crisper. And I think that it's something that I'm glad that I have, but sometimes there are things that I do have to change. So in 4 future videos, it will be far away. You won't have to deal with that, and I can understand how annoying that can be. But let's go ahead and get started and talk about the states where the Democratic Party might be, in a sense, screwing themselves over in these states in the future. I think that these few states in particular will be targets for the GOP in the future. Despite the Democratic Party's long history of winning here, I think they certainly will be on the radar due to electoral trends, the 2016 versus 2020 election results, and overall just competitive nature of the states that I think the Democratic Party might end up neglecting the same way that they did back in 2016. In 2016, the Democratic Party failed to recognize that the Rust Belt was changing tides. Hillary Clinton, had she won the Rust Belt, would have been president of the United States. But instead of funneling money into Wisconsin, Michigan, they spent it in Florida and North Carolina, states that were lost by larger margins than ones in the Rust Belt, despite them being overly neglected by the Democratic Party. And if you're looking at the amount of money that was spent, I mean, it's literally as if they looked at it for a primary and said, I'm leaving. You know, Hillary Clinton did not visit Wisconsin once after the convention. Not once. That's crazy to think about, that Hillary Clinton was the nominee and did not even visit Wisconsin. I can't even tell you how many times the Biden campaign, him and surrogates, visited Wisconsin or spent money in Wisconsin. This was a state in particular, Wisconsin, where Hillary Clinton was supposedly up 8 points and ended up losing on election night. Michigan is another state. This is a state where the Democratic Party should have been much more confident. They spent a lot of their final month in the state of Michigan bringing out big names: Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Bill Clinton. It was they had this final rally where it was celebrities and mainstream politicians that were meant to inspire the people of Michigan to vote for the Democrats. Didn't end up happening. And then Pennsylvania, a state where the Democratic Party actually held the DNC, hopefully, in their eyes, appeasing a lot of those voters there and winning over a lot of it. But as we know, that RNCs and DNCs really don't change much about the overall outcome of a specific swing state. And looking at Pennsylvania, despite all of those resources invested there, it simply wasn't enough to overcome the amount of impact that Donald Trump had in the Rust Belt. However, had Hillary Clinton in her campaign diverted more resources to Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, it's very possible that they could have won there. And I think that really came from an overestimation of support in the Rust Belt. And there is actually one state on here or 2 states on here that are in a very similar region, in the same region as the one that I just pointed out. One of them is part of those 3 states, and the other one is not. But if we're looking at our electoral map here, the Democratic Party is going to enter into 2024 with some type of electoral advantage. They won the previous election, so they only have room to fall. And if you're looking at the map, I think that the Democratic Party is certainly going to be targeting states that I mentioned yesterday, with the Republican Party overestimating. States such as Texas or North Carolina or Florida. Those were 3 states where I believe the GOP was overestimating support. Arizona and Georgia, also states. I think they were on the lesser end because they recently went to the Democrats, but I wanted to point them out. For the Democrats, we're going to start off with the state of Nevada. This is a state with a long-lasting history of voting for the Democratic Party, but in 2016, voted for Hillary by 2.4%. And then again, in 2020, let's go ahead and find the 2020 map, voted for Joe by 2.4%. The same margin, despite them being 4 years apart. However, in 2016, the Democratic Party did much better in the state of Nevada. Barack Obama won it by nearly 7 points. So Nevada took a pretty significant shift to the right relative to 2012. And then shifted slightly even more to the right from 2016 to 2020. And the reason why I think the Democratic Party might be overestimating support here is because while they do have the advantage here, if you're looking at the governor's results back in 2018, let's see if we can pull that up. Governor's election 2018. Nevada went to the Democrats. You know, Steve Sisolak defeated his Republican opponent, and it was a pretty strong victory, larger than Hillary Clinton's, and something that the Democratic Party was surely proud about. Also, in the 2018 Senate elections, the Democratic Party won here by 5 points. That's double what Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden won. So 5 points versus 2.4, a significant increase, I would say, defeating an incumbent Republican at that in the United States Senate. So Nevada, does have this Democratic representation. If you're looking at the 2 Senate seats, 2 Democrats. If you're looking at the governorship, a Democrat. If you're looking at its presidential election results since 2004, Democratic victories. But I also want to point out that, Nevada sometimes does back Republicans. It depends on the type of year, but they're not opposed to backing Republicans on the statewide level. Yes, the Democratic Party has gotten lucky, but 5-point margins are not enough to declare that Nevada will always go for the Democratic Party. The reason why I assume, and many of you guys assume, and the Democratic Party assumes, that Nevada will be a strong Democratic state is because of its history and because of its demographic breakdown. But I would not be surprised if Nevada ended up going red in 2024, depending on who the Republican nominee is going to be. At initial glance, I would say, based off Joe Biden saying that he's going to run, or the potential Kamala Harris presidential nomination, I think Nevada certainly would be leaning towards the Democrats in that scenario. But if the Republicans seem to find someone who can inspire crowds in Nevada, the same way Donald Trump did in the Rust Belt, I wouldn't exactly be super surprised. That is 100% within reach. A 2.4% margin is very, very close, and that's the amount that the Democrats won by in 2020. But I think that they are very confident about their chances in Nevada in the future, and that they will be winning there. And the numbers don't exactly reflect that. The numbers may reflect that they typically lean to the left, the same way North Carolina typically leans to the right. But there are exceptions, and there will be an exception in the near future. I think that will be surprising to some Democrats, but if you see Nevada red on some type of map in 2022 or 2024 and 2026, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. Yes, the Democratic Party has won here historically, but that does not mean that they should be overly confident about Nevada, because I certainly think that that's what we're going to see in 2022, that the Democrats might in fact be ignoring the very real possibility that Nevada could go to the Republicans in the House, and also in terms of the control of everything in the state. It's not just Senate elections. It's not just House elections. It's state legislature elections. It's governor elections. Things that matter statewide, I think the Democratic Party really needs to focus on. And while they are flaunting a lot of their presidential victories, I don't think it's the same case in Nevada, but it is the same case in Arizona and Georgia, where they may have had presidential victories, but they don't exactly have statewide victories that they can really reflect on. Maybe 2 Senate seats, yes, but they're losing in the House. They're losing in the state legislatures. They're losing in the governorship. They still have work to do. And I think the Democratic Party, if they truly want to make Nevada a state that is winnable in the future 100% of the time, they will still need to focus resources there, because it is a small state. It's only 6 electoral votes, but that can make or break an election. Moving on, the next state that I think the Democratic Party might be overestimating their support in is the state of Minnesota. Now, the reason why I say this is because I've seen many Democratic, not necessarily hopefuls, I would say Democratic surrogates on the mainstream media, previous hopefuls, people that were running for president or people that were advisors for presidential election campaigns, that were looking at this data the same way that a political analyst would, or the same way that someone from FiveThirtyEight or CNN would. And if you're looking at it, you would say, well, the reason why Minnesota is moving so far to the left, not even really so far, but you would say that probably, because of Minneapolis. If you're looking at the region here, and you're looking at the shift from 2016, a huge shift to the left, a huge shift. We're talking an 8-point shift, a 9-point shift, a 9-point shift again. If you're looking at what's happening in Minneapolis, well, you would assume that Minnesota is only going to get further and further to the left. But you do have to realize, number one, that Minnesota is decreasing in terms of its population. The population that is moving out aren't necessarily white voters, while they are a significant number of them. Overall, what we're seeing is an increase in the white percentage in the state of Minnesota, at least for incremental purposes right now. And what you're seeing in Minnesota is that because some of these inner city voters, regardless of skin color, are going to be moving out into other regions of the United States. And it is a well-known understanding that urban voters typically lean to the left. So as major cities start to decrease in population, it's not just in Minnesota, it's happening in Pennsylvania, it's happening in Michigan, it's happening around the country in certain regions where other areas such as Phoenix, Arizona, or Atlanta, Georgia are gaining these voters. They're just moving around the country. They're not moving out of the country. Minnesota, I think, is subject to that. And what we're seeing here is that Minnesota might be a state where the Democratic Party might look at it and say, we've been winning this state since 1976. The last time Minnesota went red was Richard Nixon in 1972. No other state has voted for the Democratic Party currently as long as Minnesota in terms of from 1976. Because in 1984, Ronald Reagan won every single state except for Minnesota. So at initial glance, the Democrats might say, well, Minnesota, why isn't it a Democratic state? Why wouldn't they be saying they will absolutely win it in the future? It's voted for the Democrats, longer than California up to this point. But that's not true. Actually, it is true. But it's not fair to assume that it's like California. It's not fair to assume that it's going to be this solid blue state in the future. That's the same type of thinking that lost the Democrats the Rust Belt in the first place. You see, Minnesota was definitely on the back mind of Democrats when they looked at Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, because it was that argument even Hillary Clinton had won the state of Minnesota. And while Joe Biden won the state by 7 points, it still was something that was only able to match what Barack Obama did in Minnesota in 2012. Something that was only able to match it despite a lot more money being invested into Minnesota. A lot more money being invested into the regions with similar TV airwaves where crossover ads were going from state to state. Just looking at the amount of energy that was put into the Rust Belt in 2012 versus 2020, they should have done much better than Obama. Obama raised the bar. And so far, Hillary Clinton did much worse. In 2016, despite her winning it, and it may look blue on the map, it was won by simply 1.5%. Donald Trump almost flipped the state of Minnesota. It was almost won by the former president. And if you look at this county map, a lot more blue, right? 2016, so much red in the state of Minnesota. So I think with just the right candidate, someone who is like Donald Trump with a decreasing Democratic vote share out of the city, it's going to get increasingly and increasingly more harder for the Democratic Party to rely on that area to win. And while it is moving to the left, other regions are counteracting that, which is why Minnesota is not a solid blue state. A 7-point victory, yes, that is good, but it's not enough to say without a doubt that Democrats will be winning Minnesota forever, or at least for the next 10 years. Because even as recently as 2008, the Democrats were nearly lost the Senate race on the same ballot that Barack Obama won by double digits in Minnesota. It was very, very close. Republicans still have some type of hold in this state that they can win statewide, and I think that it takes the right candidate, and it certainly takes the right energy and amount of money, amount of fundraising. But it also is a point that it's possible, and I think that it's not possible in a number of states, but in Minnesota and Nevada, it absolutely is. And then the final state is the state of Michigan. And I know that Michigan has certainly been viewed as a swing state for quite some time now, but Michigan actually voted for Donald Trump the least amount out of any of the three states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Wisconsin was 0.77. Pennsylvania was 0.72. Michigan was simply 0.27. It was very, very close, and it came down to a margin of 11,000 votes out of over 4 million cast. Well, in 2020, Joe Biden took Michigan and said, I want it to be blue again. He did the same in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, but the margin was then larger for Joe Biden in Michigan than it was in the other states, matching exactly what we saw happen in 2016. Coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, probably due to the fact that Michigan is the most Democratic state out of any of these three, it voted for Obama by the largest margin, voted for him by nearly 10 points in 2012. So looking at the election results in 2020, you might assume maybe Michigan is returning back to its Democratic identity. Maybe Michigan is all of a sudden this state where the Democratic Party is going to do super well. And for a very long period of time before the election, I thought Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania might have been like Indiana. Fluke victories for the Republican Party that would not be, or in Indiana's case, would have been the Democratic Party, but were completely reversed in the following election. Indiana went to Obama very narrowly in 2008 and then went to Romney by nearly 10 points. And that's what, for a brief period of time, I thought would happen in the Rust Belt. Now, by the end of it, I didn't think that these states would be voting for Biden by 10 points. But I did think that they would be taking a significant shift in favor of the left. However, Joe Biden swung Wisconsin and Pennsylvania by a similar margin as other states that didn't even shift significantly. We're talking, a shift comparable to the ones in maybe Massachusetts or Connecticut or Rhode Island. Nothing super significant, but just enough to flip the state because it was narrowly won by Trump in the 2016 election. But looking at Michigan, I mean, Biden, sure, he won it by 3 points, but it's not necessarily super secure. And Michigan is the only state out of the three here with two Democratic senators. Pennsylvania has Pat Toomey. Wisconsin has Ron Johnson. On top of that, Wisconsin and Michigan recently had Republican governors, but Wisconsin in 2018 ousted their Republican governor. But Michigan did it by a much larger margin. Wisconsin was very, very close, 1.1%, but Michigan was by nearly 10 points. Gretchen Whitmer did phenomenal in 2018. And if you're looking at the Senate map, it doesn't exactly tell you that these states are really competitive for the GOP. A double-digit margin in Pennsylvania, nearly a double-digit margin in Wisconsin, a 7-point margin in Michigan. And looking at the state, I think that depending on the right candidate, if we do see a Donald Trump type candidate on a statewide level, it could very well be a state won by the Republicans in a statewide race. It really ultimately depends on who the Republicans nominate, but it's not out of reach. And I think the Democrats certainly realize that Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are out of reach. But Michigan might be that one state where, and I've seen it from many people arguing that it's possible for Wisconsin and Pennsylvania to go red, but Michigan won't, because Michigan voted for Biden by the largest amount. But these states typically vote all together. And I think while that is something that is in the realm of possibility, that we could see a map where Michigan is blue and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are red, I think that the Democratic Party certainly needs to completely focus on states such as Minnesota, Michigan, and Nevada. While they will be focusing resources on Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, I would not be surprised if there was more money spent on those two states than it would be on Michigan, just because of its current composition in the Senate, in the House, in terms of its governor, in terms of its recent election victories. Michigan voted by 2.8% for Biden, actually larger than Nevada, but I think that the Democratic Party might view all three of these states as states that are 100% in their bag in 2024, and that might be a fatal mistake that is a repeat of the 2016 election. But it really comes down to what type of money will be spent in these states. That will give us a very good indicator coming around mid-2021 or end of 2021. Once the Democratic Party starts to ramp up their efforts, we will see where their major ad spending is going to be and whether or not they really believe that they are going to be competitive in certain Senate races or that they will be solid in others. And that will give us a telling sign as to where the Democratic Party is super confident about versus not so confident or maybe ambitious about. And I think that's what will be the true determinant. Money talks, and I think that will give us a much better picture than what we already know today. But based off my the assumptions that I've seen from those Democrats in the mainstream media, the articles that have been written, the arguments that have been made on media platforms, not only social media, but also on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. Michigan was largely expected to be the largest margin for Joe Biden in the 2020 election out of those three states. It was, but that doesn't mean much when the largest margin is 2.8%. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.